Welcome to Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I am your guide and host through the show. Today is our monthly series called Unpopular Real Estate Opinions with Chris Linsell. Now, Chris Linsell is a real estate technology analyst. He's also the director of content at large at Luxury Presence. Now, he specializes in new solutions to old questions, constantly exploring the cutting edge of technology in the real estate space. Now, Chris has many, many years of experience as a licensed realtor in the state of Michigan. He's also worked as a marketer, a digital strategist, and a trainer for major national brands like Berkshire Hathaway Home Services of Michigan and Coldwell Banker Schmidt Realtors. Chris is the director of content with Luxury Presence. He's an accomplished musician, actor, and speaker, and Chris has engaged with audiences in sizes ranging from 30 to 3,000. He will also be appearing at the N.A.R conference this fall, along with many other conferences. Chris, welcome to the show.
DJ, great to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Great. What are we talking about this week?
Oh, man, what are we talking about? I mean, we could talk about a number of different things, but the biggest, most important, most impactful topic that is making the rounds through real estate circles right now is clear cooperation. Clear cooperation is the topic that we need to discuss.
And I suspect a lot of agents, this might be a topic that slid a little bit under the radar with the N.A.R compensation settlement, the lawsuit that really got most of the press. But this was actually a rule that N.A.R adopted in 2019. I suspect a lot of our audience probably has never heard of clear cooperation or really fully understand it. So maybe we should first define what this rule is and who it benefits.
You betcha. Now, I want to be the first to say, you might not know the name Clear Cooperation, but if you have been operating in the real estate space in the last 5 years, you know what this is because somebody has mentioned this rule to you, even if they haven't done so by name.
Right.
So here's what Clear Cooperation is in a nutshell. There's a number of different bullet points here, but I'm going to distill it down ChatGPT style to just do a couple of sentences for everybody. Okay. Clear cooperation is the requirement that real estate professionals list a property on the MLS within 24 hours of the commencement of marketing of this property. So if you start marketing a property anywhere, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on your website, whether it is a sign in the ground in front of the property, it has to be in the MLS within 24 hours of that marketing commencing. And this is, again, there are some nuances to it, but in a nutshell, this is what this is all about. And if you didn't know this policy by name, you have heard this requirement from your managing broker. You've heard it from your team leaders. It's got to get in the MLS within 24 hours of getting the sign in the ground. This is the policy that caused all the kerfluffle around coming soon posts on social media. If you remember, like 5 years ago, this was a really big deal. Are coming soons legal? Can we do coming soons? Is this something that's fair? Clear cooperation is what happened following a couple of different things, including all the controversy around coming soon.
So I guess we should talk about currently who's on. Well, we'll talk about the pros and cons. So what are the pros of this particular this? Well, first of all, we should mention this is only, I believe, enforced for brokerages and agents at the brokerage who are members of N.A.R, right? If you're not a member of N.A.R, I suspect this wouldn't apply, but I would think 99% of our listeners are probably members of N.A.R. So at present, this applies to almost everyone we're probably reaching.
Yeah, it's important to note, this is not a law in the United States
Right.
or anywhere. This is not a regulation from any state government. This is a rule, a policy from the National Association of Realtors. So when it comes to enforcement here, There ain't no police officers knocking on your office door saying, "Hey, I noticed there was a sign in the yard of 123 Main Street 2 days ago, and I don't see it on the local MLS. What's the deal?" That's not happening. This is a policy from the National Association of Realtors. But the reason why this is such an impactful policy is the National Association of Realtors is the owner of, or owns a partially controlling stake in 9 out of every 10 MLSs across the country. So, the policy is one that is set by this professional organization, but is often enforced by the mechanism that most real estate professionals use to execute their business. So there is a lot of interplay, many, many layers here, into how this policy is enforced and by whom. And it's a little complicated sometimes.
So let's discuss the pros from the perspective of the National Association of Realtors. Of course, we are not speaking for NAR, but we are sort of understanding maybe why they've adopted this back in 2019.
Mhm.
The first reason, which probably is the most obvious reason that certainly occurred to me, was this. Well, basically streamlines a process of listing to where they could say, hey, if we allowed agents to list outside of the MLS, other places than the MLS, then it really is going to be difficult for the public to really get a sense of where all the listings are available for sale. And we're really doing this in the aim of the public good. We want like one system where people could see just about everything, and that to me it becomes sort of an equity thing. Like, can we make sure that there's one spot that since the MLS is largely a public facing site,
Mhm.
we have one spot where people can go and really see just about everything.
That's correct. I think I'll add a couple of layers of complexity to that diagnosis as well. There is a, a kind of a perspective here that if we don't have a centralized location where all available properties can be accessed or dispersed from, um, then we develop systems that are not equitable to professionals and not equitable to consumers. So, for instance, think about a market, like a hypothetical market. If we didn't, according to the National Association of Realtors, if we didn't have a clear cooperation policy, what would emerge is different realtors with um, various levels of pocket listings that are inaccessible to their colleagues. You would have an inconsistent amount of time in a coming soon status, such that markets become unpredictable. You could have somebody who lists a coming soon a month before a property goes live, and it creates an unpredictable consumer expectation for when a property might actually be available, and it also creates a level of difficulty for anyone who is trying to comp the existing market, because
Right.
if I'm an appraiser, or even if I'm a realtor who's trying to do a pricing CMA, if there are properties that are for sale but are not listed, or if there are properties that are coming soon but not technically available, because they're not technically in their listing period, how do I account for these uh, either mystery, like blank pricing comps when it comes to pockets, or to these hypothetical listings? Like, I can list a property for 10 times its market value in coming soon, and there's no way to measure the market's response to it because the property's not technically available. So uh, the National Association of Realtors has said these are the reasons why clear cooperation is an important policy to have in place. Whether or not that is actually the reason the National Association of Realtors put this in place is another question. I do you want to get into that? I mean, I don't want to get into a road of hearsay, but there is another side to that story too.
Yeah, let's hear it, because basically what we're talking about is having a centralized location where we can, where not only can everything be organized, but we can hold the agents within that container accountable for various practices and compliance, sort of enforcement, such that we're all kind of playing within the same rules. If we're allowing external listings or outside non-MLS listings on other exchanges, there really opens up a lot of sort of how do we measure those listings versus MLS listings. It just becomes a much more difficult way to sort of compare and contrast
Mhm.
value, and really just organizing data is really kind of what it boils down to. It's tougher to organize all of that data and present it to the public.
That is true, but let me provide to you another another element, a pretty important one from the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, which is our first responsibility to as realtors is to our clients. It is not to the community.
Right.
Our first responsibility is not to frankly, it is not to organize a marketplace where data
Hmm.
collection is easy. Our first responsibility as real estate professionals is to maximize the fiduciary opportunities of our buyers and sellers. And there is a very I frankly cannot see a world in which um, a mandatory requirement for listing in a particular place in a particular time frame can uh I just do not see a world where that sort of system squares with I'm going to do everything that I can in the best interest of my clients, not everyone else's clients, just mine. Because here's the reality, DJ. The best interests of my client might be to keep this listing a private listing, that I only advertise in my local circles because they don't want it exposed to the other to the rest of the MLS
Sure.
for one reason.
Celebrities, athletes, people who are in the public sphere likely don't want looky loos coming in just
Yep.
because they know they live there.
There's that's a great example, but honestly, and I'm not I'm not calling you out on this, but frankly, like that particular example, I think is tired to me.
Right.
O- Only
It's an extreme example that
it's
only applies rarely.
like one tenth of one
Yeah.
tenth of 1%
Yeah.
of listings in the United States would qualify for that. Sure. Are you selling Rihanna's house? DJ, if you're selling Rihanna's house, you got to tell us right now. Okay, listen.
Sadly, she's not picking up my call.
Okay, well, I'll tell her to call you. Um, but here's the reality: you don't have to be Rihanna for there to be a clear opportunity for a non-MLS required listing strategy to benefit you. Let me give you a great example. I own a house on 123 Main Street that I love. Somebody down the street is selling their house for way more than I thought my house was worth. I don't have any reason to move from 123 Main Street, but the realtor who's listing that house down the street for $200,000 more than I thought they would get, they come by and they say, I'm listing 456 Main Street. I know it's above market, but we've got some legitimate reasons to believe that they might get this price. Are you interested in just testing the waters? Maybe you don't want to put your house up for sale, but
Right.
how would you feel if the buyers for that came through 123 Main Street would you like me to say, by the way, or excuse me, the buyers that came through 456 Main Street, how would you like me, would you like me to say, hey, if this house doesn't work for you, 123 Main Street down the road, they might be interested in selling. Here's their price. In order to do that legally, you need a listing contract. In order to have that opportunity to market a property privately to a group of to a group of people, Clear Cooperation says that property's got to be on the MLS.
Yeah.
That is a that does not require a Rihanna level home sale for Clear Cooperation to not make sense to my clients, because it isn't about servicing the community,
Right.
as backwards as that sounds, and as contrary to what my message all the time is to people, is that our responsibility as realtors is to be the mouthpiece and advocates for our communities, because nobody knows housing in our communities better than the real estate professionals. But in this instance, we are not wearing that hat. Clear Cooperation is a conversation where we are wearing our client advocacy hats only. And honestly, the problem here is that Clear Cooperation, as it stands right now, is a blanket policy with no exceptions.
Right.
There are no ways to wiggle in and out of that, and frankly, it just doesn't make sense in the context of being our first responsibility to be to our clients.
I have a friend who 2 or 3 years ago, so this is pre-settlement, had a $7 million buyer, and or rather, yeah, she had a buyer, and there was a listing that was what the buyer wanted. The seller pulls out last minute. Well, turns out right next door to that listing is another $7 million property, and the agent walked to over next door and said, "Hey, your next door neighbor bailed out on this, but this property is perfect for my buyer. He's going to buy something. If I can get you this price, what do you think?" And the person's like, I don't want to list it, but if you can get me that price, we'll sell it.
Mhm,
So the exact same example, and again, this is a $7 million listing. Obviously, that's an unusual price listing for most of us, but that is exactly the same example you shared, and
mhm,
she was able to get the deal closed. And I think she probably did have to list it for one day to
mhm,
sell it, but they ideally it would have been a private sale
mhm.
of sorts. Yeah.
Yep. So you bring up a great point. That's a fantastic example to talk about how the existing system has uh, kind of a jagged and uncoordinated connection to this idea of created sales and off market sales. These are Venn diagrams with a ton of overlap. And what we wind up doing, because of the restrictions of Clear Cooperation, we wind up having to cobble together um, these created sales where there's some guesswork that is involved, because we just can't do what is in the best interest of our clients, by virtue of the restrictions of Clear Cooperation. Now, I I want to stop for just a second and say, it sounds like I'm ragging a lot on Clear Cooperation, and I am. I mean, let's call a spade here, but there are elements of what Clear Cooperation is shooting for that I think are important. For instance, I do think it is important for professionals in a community to have a clear picture of what the property in a community is worth by virtue of an organized system of comps. I think that Clear Cooperation targets this, but does so in kind of an unfocused way. If I was rewriting the policies, and N.A.R, if you're listening, call me. Um, if I was rewriting the policy, I would rewrite it to say uh, the policy does not require the listing, but it does require the reporting of sales.
Right.
Such,
So
such
like
that
go ahead. I'm sorry.
we know afterwards, like after a sale is closed, there is a responsibility to report sales to the MLS that can be listed post transaction. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I think it is valid to point out here that one of the reasons, in my opinion, and granted, this is a little unpopular right now, but that's the title of the show here, so that's okay. One of the reasons why this uh, this conversation is so fervent right now, and frankly, why I will not be surprised if there isn't some pretty dramatic announcements and conversations from the NAR before the conference in Boston this November. One of the reasons why I think there's so much momentum here is that following the compensation lawsuit settlements, there has been an appropriate re-emphasis and now laser focus on the development of individualized value and brand differentiation in the real estate community. The fact that buyer comp is no longer a virtual guarantee, the fact that buyers have to actually, or excuse me, buyers agents have to actually prove that they are worthy of the commission that they are getting. It's not a guarantee written into the listing agreement any longer. It is putting into stark contrast the fact that it's not just your brand and your differentiated value in terms of your skill set and experience that matters. If Clear Cooperation goes away, you know what else gets added to this list? It's your connections. It's your ability to source the off-market properties or the privately listed properties that other agents can't see. And this is where the idea of private listing networks, walled gardens that are not the MLS, but do contain properties that are for sale. This is where a real estate professional can really leverage their connection to their community, because those agents who can leverage that connection to their community and demonstrate that they have access to all of the property that's for sale, even the most exclusive, even the non-traditionally listed property, those are agents that are going to be much more valuable and be able to differentiate themselves much more strongly than the agents who are just kind of sitting back, refreshing Zillow, waiting to see what's online.
We should mention too that NAR created of their own admission, created this policy, and one of the objectives was to stem the private listing networks, stem uh, the growth of the private listing network. Again, NAR is thinking in terms of equality. They want people to have access to the same database so that they can make a good case why their existence is so important to consumers. Is they're like, we want to make this a level playing field where you have access to everything. And we should also mention that in the last week, maybe week and a half, two major brokerages have come out in against this policy. Just today or yesterday, Anywhere, one of the largest real estate companies in the world, certainly in this country, in the United States, they have most of the big brands that we know, big brokerages. They said they would like to push NAR to abandon the policy. Robert Refkin with Compass did this a week ago, basically said the same thing. And that's just the first two brokerages to sort of sound off on it. Because in their perspective, I believe, is NAR, we don't need you to tell us where these listings need to be marketed. We are fiduciaries. We are going to operate in our client's best interest. And maybe that's the MLS, maybe it isn't, but we need to be able to make that choice for our agents, for our clients.
Yeah, and like, let's be clear. I have a feeling there are some folks, even if you work for an Anywhere brand, you don't know that Anywhere is the brand that represents Coldwell Banker, Century 21, ERA,
Better Homes and Gardens,
Gardens, Sotheby's, Corcoran. I mean, these are all these are the major brands, the major franchise brands in the United States. Um, and honestly, there is an interesting set of motivations here, but I do want to come back to an interesting point that I kind of made offhandedly earlier. It- there are some real estate brands that are pushing against this. Um, Glenn Kelman of Redfin is pushing against this. There's a handful of places, but you know who's really pushing against this is Zillow, and the major reason why is, and again, Zillow, if you're listening, call me. I got some great advice for you here. Um, the major reason Zillow is pushing hard against this is that their business is built on the idea that they're going to get all the listings by virtue. Oops, I'm knocking stuff over on my desk. I'm so excited about this. Zillow's business is built on the fact that they have unfettered access to all of the properties that are getting listed for sale by virtue of their relationships with these MLSs. I mean, think about all of the ways that Zillow gets data. It is all of these IDX relationships with brokerages. If Clear Cooperation went away, excuse me, not with brokerages, with MLSs. If Clear Cooperation went away, and um, let's just be conservative here. Let's say 5% of listings left the MLSs, were never listed on the MLSs. It doesn't seem like very much, but I want you to think about for a moment the amount of traffic that Zillow drives annually. Even it's an extraordinary number. There is a not insignificant percentage of that traffic that is driven by consumers who actually don't have any purpose. They're not looking to actually buy. They're looking to use that portal to essentially uh, house surf. They're looking for the most outrageous and beautiful listings because they just like looking at houses, the biggest, the most expensive, the craziest. They want to see the most exclusive listings in their communities or in communities they don't live in. Those are going to be the first listings that will leave Zillow. It's the most expensive house in your community is the most likely one to take advantage of an exclusive private listing network or not be listed on the MLS at all. That is going to have a measurable effect on the traffic of Zillow. And if agents start to find success listing properties other than the on places other than the MLS, there will be a snowball that will start rolling away from Zillow in terms of the amount of properties that are on that site. It right now is like a de facto national MLS.
Right.
That won't be the case. We are going to move to a place where instead of having one national MLS by virtue of Zillow, we are going to have 100 small walled gardens across the United States that are these private listing networks that are specific to property type, to buyer type, that are specific to seller scenarios, like kind of the name your price, like sellers who are like, make me sell kind of thing. Like if I can get the right price, I'll sell, but otherwise I'm not listing. Or sellers that are saying, uh, I'm interested in selling my home, but I don't want to expose it to the full market. I don't want everybody seeing in my living room, that sort of thing. That happens. Uh, Zillow is going to have to pivot. I mean,
Or they're going to have to build relationships with each of those other listing exchanges and
yep.
marketplaces and somehow coordinate all of that. And we should mention too that yes, agents tend to, a lot of agents tend to think unfavorably about Zillow, and whatever your personal feelings are about Zillow, they touch something like 90+% of all residential real estate transactions
Mhm.
at some portion. Literally almost everyone is on Zillow at some point in the transaction. So yes, we could all root for Zillow. We can root for Zillow to fail as a company because of our personal feelings, but is that also in the public's good for Zillow to fail? I don't know, because
Yeah.
if it's touching, we really now are back to sort of what's in the best interest of the public. Is it better to have 10 grocery stores in town that all have some of the same stuff but have unique items in each grocery store?
Mhm.
Or is it better to have one grocery store? Well, that's a debatable topic, right?
It's a great question. I will say this. I'm going to make a prediction. It's probably unpopular with some folks, but if it comes down to a clear cooperation policy disappearing, and in order for Zillow to continue to be effective, they have to make relationships with these individual private listing networks. If that is what is required, it's not going to happen, because Zillow's relationships were not built with agents. They were built with the MLSs. Zillow, I mean, and who owns 90% of the MLSs? It's the National Association of Realtors. Zillow is a partner with the NAR, that not with the individual members. The individual members didn't sign up for that partnership, and we have, if this all comes to pass, we have a rare instance where we can literally get a do-over here. Agents can say, knowing what I know now about how my relationship has been with this platform in the last 15 years, will I willingly re-enter into this relationship with them? I gotta say, I don't think that they will say yes. I don't believe that agents will sign up for that again.
What do you think, if you could wave a magic wand and
Mhm.
create a policy or a non-policy around clear cooperation, what do you think would be in the best and highest good of everyone?
If I was setting the policy, clear cooperation as a rule would go away. There would be no requirement to market properties actively on the MLS. There would be a requirement to report sales to the MLS. And in instances where sellers don't want to list on the MLS for privacy concerns, there would be a box for anonymizing listings, such that we have the data without the address, if that makes sense. Like,
Mhm.
we have the listing data, but I can't tie it back to a particular transaction. The other thing I would say, if I was waving a magic wand and resetting policy, I would, first of all, I wouldn't set policy at with a trade group. I would, m I would create, uh, probably regulation in the United States that says, "Here are the ground rules for listing property," and tie it to fair housing. Like, we already have these principles in place, these foundations of discrimination in place. You may advertise your property as long as you don't violate the laws of the United States. We already do this when it comes to rental properties. Rental properties can be advertised in 100 different ways. They are not required to be on the MLS. We just can't advertise them in ways that break fair housing rules. It makes perfect sense that that's the direction we would go with sales too.
Well, I'm very interested to see what will happen. Again, this really speaks a lot to brokerages continuing their NAR memberships, the MLS, and their relationship to National Association, and just again, what's always in the best public interest or in the best fiduciary interest of the customer. And it is a really thorny issue because there isn't a clear and obvious solution to this that is clean. um, but there's certainly more conversations to have. I would love to. We rarely ask for feedback, but I would love to know what our audience thinks would be in their client's best interest. Would you prefer to have a decentralized, essentially MLS, where people could post on different exchanges and you would just have to be aware of those different exchanges and maybe you'd have access to some and not others? Or would you like to see everything in one location? I'd be very curious from the agent level what they think would be most effective for them. And so please let us know, Chris. If I would love people to really chime in on this one.
Mhm.
What would be the best way for somebody to give you their opinion if they had a specific thought about this?
Yeah, I would too. You can do two things. One, Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love conversations on LinkedIn. I post there every day. Come on over. Follow me on LinkedIn. Comment on a post. Send me a DM. I love to hear from folks. Two, you can find me on Instagram, Coach Chris Linsell. It's pretty straightforward. That's an easy place to get a hold of me as well. And yeah, share your feedback here. This is definitely a conversation that is going to continue to evolve. And I want to make it totally clear. I think that the MLS is in itself a good thing. I don't think a requirement from a man. Let me just say this. Like, I like the National Association of Realtors. I believe in its purpose and its value. I'm speaking at their conference in Boston. If you're listening and you're going to Boston this year for the N.A.R conference, come see me. I would love to hear what you have to say. I also think that there is a inherent conflict of interest for a trade group that owns a portal to require people to use that portal with and then also be able to say, out one side of their mouth require them to use the portal, and out of the other side of their mouth say, well, we are here to represent your best interests, even if your best interests are to not post on the MLS. It just is. There's cognitive dissonance that needs to be resolved by the removal of a requirement here.
Yeah.
So whether you believe what I say, whether you think I'm full of it, I would love to hear from you. Find me on Instagram, find me on LinkedIn, or just message DJ personally and he can relay it to me.
I can relay it. And also, too, sound off to your local association. Let them, they work, well, they don't work for you necessarily, but they are there to represent you. So please let them know your thoughts, because NAR does listen to the local associations. NAR is here in Chicago, where I'm located, and I can tell you for sure that their ears are open to what local associations are wanting and needing. Also, from a broker's level, let the leaders in your community know what you would prefer. Chris, great chatting with you again. For everything, Chris, to learn his speaking schedule, to also follow him on social media and just reach out to him in particular. Maybe you want to schedule, maybe you'd like to hire him for a speaking engagement. He speaks all over the country, all throughout the year, different topics. He is a featured NAR speaker and is usually an audience favorite. He gets some of the highest satisfaction scores from attendees because he is so engaging and obviously great on our show as well. ChrisLinsell.com is where you go to find him. You can follow him on social, of course, there. And Chris, on behalf of everyone, thank you again for your insight. We really appreciate you helping us make sense of the Clear Cooperation policy. And also, we want to thank our audience on behalf of Chris and myself to making it to the end of the episode. Please tell a friend, leave us a review, let us know what you think of the show, and tell us what you think should happen with this Clear Cooperation policy. We will see everybody on the next episode. Chris, thank you so much.
DJ, see you next time.